Greetings, it's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and I wanted to give you an example that could help you understand what we're looking for this first paper. So as you see on the screen, these are the directions from your syllabus. The first paper due in week 3 is called the Successful Organizational Change Factor Analysis paper. And I'm just going to read the instructions, and you can read them along with me. It's always a really good idea to read the instructions before you start the paper, and then again before you submit your paper. Again, when you're submitting your paper, make sure you use your saved as name using your first and last name in the save feature, and also the name of the paper and the class number. It helps your professors keep your paper organized. So make sure you leave at least your last name and the name of the paper and the course number in your save as name. So here's the instructions, and please make sure that you read the instructions on your own before you start writing the paper, and then double check to make sure that you've included all of these aspects in your final paper. I've shared other videos in our announcements that help you understand what makes a good APA 7th edition paper. I'm going to be making some comments in this video to help you see what the student has done right and maybe where some opportunities are to do things better. So again, here's the instructions. Identify and analyze the elements of successful organizational change and the forces that work for and against a successful organizational change. So that's your goal, is we want to become an expert, and we do that by taking a look at organizations. This paper should have 4 sections, and so here's one of the things that you may not have realized when you're writing a graduate level paper. When the professor is saying they're looking for specific sections, those should be the general level 1 APA headings. So help your professors see that you've followed directions by making sure that when they are looking for specific things in the paper, that those are level 1 APA headings. And again, as you'll see in the videos, level 1 papers are bold, they're centered, and the major words in the heading are capitalized. So this paper should have 4 sections. A, an introduction to the organization, including its mission, vision, stakeholders, and any other demographic relevant data. One of the subtle things about APA writing is we don't use the word introduction in APA student papers. We use the title of the paper over that section because it's just assumed that the first paragraph or paragraphs is the introduction. So introductions tell us what the paper is about, and they're written in first person, or they're written in past tense, excuse me. So again, the first section should include an introduction to the organization. This could be an organization that you work for or have worked for, or one that you're very familiar with, including its mission, vision, stakeholders, and any other demographic or relevant data. So make sure you've covered each of those in your introduction paragraph or paragraphs. B, an analysis of the forces that work for the success of organizational change. So get into the scholarly literature and see if you can help find things related to forces that work for the success of an organizational change. You may be finding some of these factors in our discussion questions along the way. C, an analysis of forces that work against a successful organizational change. So again, you should have a level 1 heading that talks about forces that work for success of change. and you should have a level 1 heading in your paper that says analysis of forces that work against successful organizational change. So those are some things that you should be researching in the scholarly literature in this class about organizational change to become an expert in organizational change. And then a conclusion. Remember, conclusions summarize key ideas from the whole paper. If someone were to just read the conclusion, they should know, generally speaking, what your paper was about with some specific detail. So the paper should be 5 to 7 pages, double spaced, 12-point font, Times New Roman font. If you go over 7 pages, it shows me that you're being thorough. So be succinct, but also be very thorough. Support your ideas with the literature. You become an expert when you are showing that you have done your research on what the experts are saying about our topics. Then you need a minimum of 5 peer-reviewed scholarly sources. So peer-reviewed sources are interesting. That means other experts have approved these sources, and you get those by checking the scholarly peer-reviewed sources button as you're doing research in the library database. What's interesting to note is that Harvard, the Harvard publications are not peer-reviewed. So some people think that because Harvard is a scholarly institution that they're peer-reviewed, but they're not. So do make sure that you are looking for scholarly peer-reviewed sources. You'll notice here on the bottom that we are also looking for that you integrate these models into your paper. So Cotter's change model, Lewin's change model, McKinsey's 7S model, the situational approach, and transformational leadership models. So all of those models need to be incorporated into your paper too. So let's see how this student did at meeting each of those expectations. All right, so here we go. All right, so let's take a look at the cover page. So on the cover page, you'll notice there is no running head. APA 7th edition does not use an APA heading, so that's right, but there is a number 1 in the top right-hand corner, so that's perfect. The title of the paper is about 3/4 of the way down from the top of the paper, and it's bold with capital letters, and so this is the title of the paper, Successful Organizational Change Factor Analysis. The paper, you don't have to write paper, but that's the name of the paper. Your name should be in the place of student name, the university and school, your professor's name, and then the date that you're submitting the paper on. The abstract should be less than 150 words, and this author did a good job of that. The purpose of the abstract is so that people could quickly read the abstract and know what this paper is about. Again, notice this is not saying this paper will do this, because the paper is already written. So it's written in past tense. So this paper reviews the factors present in a small university that contribute to its potential success. So that helps people understand what this is about. So notice the author did not say introduction over the first paper. It's already assumed that the first section, paragraph or paragraphs, is the introduction. And you notice this author did not say this paper will discuss. The author said this paper discusses, because the paper is already written when the people reading it, especially a professor, have done that. So the purpose of the introduction is to tell people what the paper is about. And this author mentions that it discusses a small university's capacity for change, and it mentions that it uses situational and transformational leadership model. So remember, one of the things that was asked for was an overview of the organization. And so the author did that by mentioning this is the overview. So it looks like that this paper was actually written by an employee of City University in Canada. And the author talks about that. Remember, we're looking for demographic information, an overview of the organization. In this case, it was City University. We were looking for an analysis of successful organizational change. I could see the author brought Cotter into it, which was one of the expectations of the instructions. And again, you could pause the video. Notice how this author used Jones and Harvey 2017. So he is supporting his ideas with the scholarly literature. There's a lot of ways to do in-text citation, but this is one of them. So they did a good job. Here they introduced transformational leadership here, and they used the Nordhaus book. So that probably should have been as cited in Nordhaus 2019. Because Nordhaus is not the author of Transformational Leadership Style, so that's Bass that really introduced it. But that's okay, using a secondary scholarly source is fine. Analysis of organizational barriers to change was one of the headings. So I would say this author really didn't do a very good job of supporting ideas from the scholarly literature of ideas that support transformational leadership. So he just touched the surface of it. Here he incorporated Lewin's three-step model and cited these two authors. But did he actually talk about barriers that go against organizational change? So in this section, the author should have done some researches on things that don't help organizational change, but actually push against it or make organizational change a little more difficult, and then was able to analyze what's going on in the organization that may have some of these factors that could have caused change to be challenged a little bit. So it looks like this author could have done a better idea of supporting those ideas of factors that make organizational change a little more challenging. So what are those factors? Here he talks about situational leadership and brings a couple more authors into this. But I'm not so sure that the author really found concepts that support organizational change and talked about what those factors were in that organization, and things that push against creating successful organizational change and what those are in this specific organization as they exist. So this author probably didn't get an A on the paper for not completing that part of the assignment. Again, in the conclusion, you want to summarize key ideas from the whole paper, so if someone were to just go to the conclusion section, they would be able to see. And again, every paragraph should be supported with scholarly in-text citations. So it looks like this particular author had more than the minimum amount of references, but did they use scholarly references? And at first glance, it looks like it. Generally speaking, when there's the word journal or quarterly, those generally are scholarly references, but you find those by clicking the scholarly references. And again, it looks like the author did a nice job doing AP formatting. There's spaces after the periods. Publication titles are in italics. They have the links to where they found the article in ProQuest, or a DOI address. So they're not using authors' first names, they're just using the last name of the authors followed by the initials of the authors, which is a good thing. So the publication name should be in italics, not the publisher name. And anyway, so not a great paper, but hopefully you have a better idea what we're looking for. Again, it's wise to read your paper out loud before submitting a paper for a grade, and double checking that you've met all the expectations of the grading rubric. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.